Because we read in the very next verse, now the Lord spoke to Paul in the night by a vision, and he said to him, do not be afraid, but speak and don't keep silent. And there's the dilemma. Paul was afraid and contemplating saying nothing else. Though there was success and God was blessing, Paul really didn't like what he thought the outcome might be. The Lord went on and he said to Paul in this vision, I am with you. No one will attack you to hurt you. I have many people in this city. Now that's the Lord himself addressing Paul's great concerns. You know, I have to believe that Jesus showed up in Paul's vision at the absolute perfect time, you know, greatly needed. He'd had enough. And this wouldn't be the Lord's last visit. He will visit him again in Acts 23 in Jerusalem years later. But for the Lord to say to Paul, don't be afraid, tells you he is. In fact, we read that first Corinthians chapter 2, verse 3. Paul said, I was with you in great fear. This wasn't the guy you might imagine in your mind, you know, always with a pulpit and a fist in your face, you know, waving it at you. You know, this was a little guy who had been broken by the road. This was not an easy stretch for him to follow. And when revival came, Paul started in his mind going, there was a revival in Lystra, and we were beaten up. And there was a revival in Philippi, and we were taken out. And there was a revival in Berea, and they came looking for us. And there was a revival in Thessalonica, and they couldn't get me out of town fast enough. And there's a revival here in Corinth. Oh, man, here we go again. I think I'll start getting blood transfusions early before I get beat up, you know. Wherever there had been great gain, there had followed great personal pain. And if you think for 1 minute that Paul was a super saint, think again. He wasn't. He was just like we are, you know. He flinched when he got hit again too. So Paul is brave, but he sees revival and he loves it and he hates it all at the same time. Does that make sense? He was excited for it, but oh, he just knew, you know, what was coming with it, or so he thought. And so Paul needed a boost, and the Lord gave it to him. And there's not many words here, but man, how powerful are they, you know? Paul was considering just shutting it down, and the Lord says to him, don't be afraid, and don't quit speaking. Or don't even consider that you quit speaking. You can't do that. Here's what I'll do, Paul. I'll keep people from attacking you. I've got a lot of people in this city. That'd be a great message from the Lord, wouldn't it? I mean, my goodness, the surest defense for fear is the awareness of God's presence with you. That's the surest defense, isn't it? Well, no, God's with me. David learned that. He wrote in Psalm 23, verse 4, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Paul, I'm with you. All right, Lord. And Paul does it later as well. He grabs a hold of it. He writes to the Romans, if God be for us, who can be against us? Good lesson to learn, don't you think? Not an easy one to learn, because, you know, you don't see God with your eyes necessarily, but yet you have to see him with your heart. I remember as a little kid, you know, we had this terrorist that lived down the street from us. He was 8 years old and had 3 teeth missing. But this guy could plow me, you know. I was pretty good at fighting as a kid, grew up kind of fighting, but this kid just hurt me. And he would hurt me whenever he wanted, you know, and I'd get to near his house and I just want to run, you know. But I also wanted to kill the kid. So I didn't really know, but I couldn't have ever killed the kid. He'd have just killed me. But when my dad would walk with me, like down the store, man, I was not worried about that kid at all. I'd make faces at him. I had sign language. I would communicate with him and tell him stuff, you know, how much I cared about him. But when my dad was gone, it was a whole different deal. And I think Paul had maybe for the moment lost track of the fact that the Lord was there. And he felt by himself. No, I'm there. All right. Lord, if you're there, you know, that's what I need to hear. And then for the Lord to say, no man will hurt you, that he promises him this divine protection. He didn't, by the way, promise him that in any other city. But this was the place he needed to hear it, you know. Sometimes God brings you through trials, and he had with Paul. Sometimes God delivers you from trials. And that's what he was promising to do for Paul this time. Let me just pull the plug on any problems with people, okay? I know, Lord. No, I'll take care of it, you know? And you read these, you know, accounts, and you want to read them in light of how does that affect my life, and you say to yourself, well, why does he one time deliver him, and the next time he lets them go through it, and why doesn't he just deliver them all the time? And my answer is, I don't know. I know I'd much rather be delivered from trials than through trials. If I have to learn something from a trial, it's all right if you go through it and write a book. I'll read it. Somehow at God's discretion, and he does everything well. Sometimes, you have to go through it to learn the lessons about faith. Other times, God can just make you promises and you can hang on to them. But I sense Paul was getting a little paranoid, a little timid, He hadn't really preached the whole gospel till they showed up. And then he was a little hesitant after he tried it because of how violently they behaved themselves. Look, Paul, no one's going to hurt you. And then I love what the Lord says. He looks around Corinth. He says, I have a lot of people in this town. And I thought to myself, do we look around Whittier and go, these are God's people, even when they're not saved yet? I don't think we do that. But God was able to say to Paul, look around, see God's people.